Today we'll be doing partial dentures, which is part of our PRT 410 course, and we will be designing acrylic and metal partial dentures. So I will be starting with doing an acrylic partial denture, and we'll go through the steps of designing a partial denture. Now at this stage we would have surveyed our model, we would have drawn our teeth according to our model, and remember this is a two-dimensional view of something three-dimensional. The first thing we do after we've surveyed, we have identified where all our undercuts are, and we would have put it on the teeth, whether it's buccal, mesial, distobuccal, palatal. All of these would have been added while we were doing surveying, and we would have done our guide planes. And by doing the guide planes, we also identifying the need for replacing the teeth. And remember, guide planes has to be, a guide plane has to be 3 millimeters in length, and it's usually a parallel surface between the two abutment teeth. So we have identified the need, which is the first step in designing an acrylic partial denture. The next step is to provide support, and remember, support has to do with preventing the denture from sinking into the saddle areas or sinking into areas where there are no teeth, and thus preventing it from becoming like a complete denture or a mucosal supported denture. Support has to be provided on the teeth immediately next to a saddle, because that is where the denture will tend to sink into the tissues. And because we have two canines here, I will indicate that we will be using the canines. And we've got two rests, and support has to do with providing a partial denture that has 3 rests. Remember the 3-legged stool, and the third rest will come from usually from our clasp, which will go through the embrasure area. So we've identified our support. The next step is to provide retention, and retention has to do with preventing the denture from being removed or displaced along the path of insertion. We have identified our guide planes, and we have done that on the surveyor. The next step is then to provide active retention, which has to do with clasp and undercut. If I look at this, usually in a class 4 situation, the first option or the best option will be to use mesial undercut. So here I will use mesial undercut on my 6s, my 1/6 and my 2/6, and because the clasp is going through the embrasure area, this will also act as a rest, and in fact I will have 1, 2, 3, 4 rest. Cingulum rests on the canine, and an embrasure rest on the molar, and another embrasure rest on between the 6 and the 7. So the next step is reciprocation. Remember Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Whenever we place an active arm, a clasp, we'll have to provide reciprocation. And because this is an acrylic partial denture, reciprocation is going to come from the acrylic plate. And this is how we indicate it. So the clasp is always the terminal third of the clasp is engaging the undercut, because the outline that I've made here with the tooth, that indicates the undercut. So everything on this side of the tooth and on palatal side of the tooth is undercut. So I'll have to indicate that my clasp is sitting, the terminal third of the clasp is sitting in the undercut area. The same on the 2/6, the terminal third and the bulk or the body of the clasp is not in the undercut area. My reciprocal part of the plate is not in the undercut area, so is drawn above the line of the tooth. So I've got my active retention, I've got my reciprocation, I've identified my support. The 5th step is to now connect the denture so that the dental technician can see what he or she must design. Because I've got cingulum rest, I'm going to have to cover that, because my preparation will be on the lingual surface of the tooth. Because I have 2 teeth, I can actually relieve the 2 teeth, connect it with my plate. I will do the same on the second quadrant. Okay, so I'm busy connecting the components, drawing my partial denture. So now I'm looking whether I have connected all the parts, whether my clasps are attached to my acrylic partial denture. I've got my clasp in the undercut area. The acrylic plate is providing reciprocation. I've got cingulum rests on the canines. My plate, my major connector, is providing horizontal stability as well. And from this I know, and from my knowledge, I know that for an acrylic partial denture I have to use 0.5 undercut and 1 millimeter stainless steel wire. And this is indicated where I'm using my clasp. So the undercut, the wanted undercut, is 0.5 millimeters, and the technician now knows that he or she must use a 1 millimeter stainless steel wire to provide my active retention. And I look at whether I have used the fewest attachments, because remember, with an acrylic partial denture the concern is always that our retainers, active retainers, are stainless steel in this case, and it's mechanically attached to the acrylic partial denture. My wanted undercut is 0.5, and during surveying, if I did not find that undercut, I would then build up undercut. So the last step is to indicate to the technician at the bottom all my preparations that I'm going to do in the clinics. So in this case, for example, I would have prepared guide planes on the mesial of the 1-3 and the mesial of the 2-3. I would probably have built up undercuts 2.5 of a millimeter on the mesial buckle of the 1-6, the mesial buckle of the 2-6. If I did not have enough space, I have to prepare an embrasure rest, and then I'll have to look at the opposing occlusion also to see whether I need to prepare or do some occlusal adjustments on the lower model. So all the preparations I'm going to write here at the bottom, and this will indicate to the technician that these were my preparations that I've made. So finally, when I look at it again, I'm looking at whether I've got guide planes. I've drawn my denture in contact with my teeth, my abutments, whether I have my 3 rests, 1, 2, and I have 2 embrasure rests. I've got active retainers, a minimum of 2, and remember it must be 1 in each quadrant. Whether I have provided reciprocation for my active retainers, whether I have enough horizontal stability, and whether I have connected my components correctly. When I look at this, this will be my acrylic partial denture for a class 4 denture, and I will write down all the preparations, so all the instructions that I need to give to the technician, I will then write down at the bottom. So I've used mesially engaging clasps. If I can show you another design. In this design, I've actually used a mesially engaging clasp and a distally engaging clasp. But remember, never 2 distally engaging clasps. So the first option is always 2 mesially engaging clasps, or 1 mesially and 1 distally engaging clasp. Another design I could have done was, instead of using acrylic cingulum rest, I can use half round wire rest on my canines, and the advantage of this design is then that I can actually relieve more teeth. Instead of only 2 teeth, I can then relieve the canines and 2 premolars, still using my mesially engaging clasp. And this is according to the Avery denture, where we can relieve as long as we have a space of 3 millimeters or more, so that it is not a food trap. And this is the alternatives of a class 4 denture. And remember, we will always write our instructions to the technician so that the technician will know exactly what we require of him or her. And this will be the acrylic partial denture. Okay, so we have designed our acrylic partial denture, and remember, with all acrylic components it is solid lines. So the next step we will do is to design a metal partial denture. Just to reiterate that all our clasps are solid lines, and I will refer back to this when we finish with our metal partial denture.